Last night I came across this bill, introduced bill called H.R. 3498, or the Human Cloning Prohibition Act of 2105. It was introduced by the Representative Andy Harris on 9/11/2015, so not too long ago, to amend Title 18 United States Code to prohibit human cloning. And here is like the bill. I printed it out, and I'm going to go over their findings and what they are proposing or introducing inside of this bill for the future, or around the lines that they are thinking. Section number 2 shows the findings. Congress finds that some individuals have announced that they will continue attempts to clone human beings using the technique known as somatic cell nuclear transfer, or stem cells, already used with limited success in cloning sheep and other animals. I'm pretty sure a cat was cloned. Then on part 14 of this bill, they actually mention that cloned human embryos have been created in a few cases to be destroyed to extract embryonic stem cells, I guess for medical advances. These few successes substantially increase the risk for exploitation of women for human eggs needed to create clones, and continued experimentation makes it more likely that there will be attempts to gestate cloned human embryos to birth. Nearly all scientists agree that such attempts pose a massive risk, producing children who are stillborn, unhealthy, they may have birth defects or are severely disabled, and it is considered an virtually unanimous opinion across the board supposedly, that such attempts are therefore grossly irresponsible and unethical. The issue with this is, in my opinion, that it's already happening. You think about the first thing that comes to mind is IVF, in vitro fertilization, because of infertility or somebody having genetic issues, and them taking some type of online DNA test or genetic test, and then that helping them push them into the direction of in vitro fertilization. The same goes for potentially this infertility and genetic problems being caused by a previous government agenda of like spraying poisons or prescribing certain medications that may prevent pregnancy or make it harder in the future, or even contaminating the food or water supply to make it harder to get pregnant. But clearly in vitro fertilization is already happening, so calling it grossly irresponsible and unethical, that seems kind of wrong in a sense, because otherwise that should not be allowed either, because you are using a sperm and an egg and you are putting them together in a little petri dish, you're letting them grow, and when they're ready to be implanted into the woman or the womb, that's when I guess it is considered life, though they say. But what happens when they one day create artificial wombs, for example, since they're creating, organs and other such tissues out of stem cells, and eventually were to be able to create, little wombs that could house such embryos without the need of a woman, hence the term men having babies and all that stuff coming up quite often. Efforts to create human beings by cloning mark a new decisive step towards turning human reproduction into a manufacturing process in which children are made in laboratories to preordained specifications and potentially in multiple copies. So there's several things that come into play. Many people right now during this time are giving up their sperms and their eggs to many of these banks, correct? And these banks can hold on to them. How do you, as the individual, know if they're using one of your sperms or eggs? Secretly, are you honestly counting them every time? And technically you are giving the facility, permission to house them, to take care of them, and to use them. So they could technically, I guess, use sperms or eggs that have been stored eventually in the future for such purposes to create clones or multiple copies or even babies. And I'm assuming the cloning mark is, and when they mention the cloning mark, the first thing that comes to mind is the mark of the beast, as they say, or also this cloning movie, I don't know the name, but inside of it, every time they get cloned, they get a little dot underneath their eyelid to help identify them. And it is important to be able to identify them, because they can't only just take your DNA through sperm and egg like banks, or you giving them permission to do this. They could technically also retrieve your DNA if you go to a doctor and they take just a simple sample, like a blood sample or something, and in that moment you are giving up your consent, and it can be used for whatever purpose. And what if they happen to make a clone out of you, and then there's you and then your clone out there? How do you identify the original person who gave the DNA from the clone? And this is important because technically one could argue that a clone is considered a second-class citizen, which means that it may or may not have the potential of being destroyed. And let's just say you're someone political or famous or something like this, or just even somebody random, it doesn't really matter. And they can use this to their advantage. They can make a clone out of you, but then kill the original, and then tweak the clone to their needs, and just have a copy ready, if really needed be. And we'll get further into that into the video. And because it is an asexual form of reproduction, cloning confounds the meaning of father and mother, and confuses identity and kinship relations of any cloned child, and thus threatens to weaken existing notions regarding who bears which parental duties and responsibilities for the children. Is it the person who donated the sperm or the egg, or the parents paying for it? In some cases, will it be the government if they're doing it in their lab for like creating an army out of clones or something? And what if they use your sperm and egg or DNA? Then you have no say-so, and you might not even be considered the mother or the father. And at any point in time, they may or may not take it away. If for some reason these laws that they're trying to put into effect, or write or propose, slightly change or come into fruition, there's many various ways this can happen. If they eventually try to take the kids away and control the clones too much, I believe that'll be the beginning the Clone Wars,